What were you doing in the dream last night, baby? I've been listening to 13 Tales of Love and Revenge a lot lately. It's gotta be one of my favorite albums. And I think it's kind of tragic that not many people know about it. Every song on it is really great. All 13 of them. I have a day that's pretty much all to myself right now because I'm set to go to work basically at night for the morning shift. And so I decided to sleep until I woke up at 2:15 or so. So I'm just spending this 12-hour period doing nothing, which I'm kind of glad to have a break from doing stuff now. It's good to sometimes just have space. Space to let your mind go. I guess I haven't really had that since probably, I don't know, because I've always been working on a big project. So I just got done with that clown video, which isn't even 2 weeks old now. And before that, I was doing Fundamentally Loathsome Part 3. So I've just been very busy for a long time, and I kind of like being able to take it easy. But, I've been working, so I guess I have been busy in a sense. But I don't know, I feel like I've made... There's Cosmic, hello. I feel like I've made enough videos now that, I could probably die and feel pretty satisfied by what I've put out already. I mean, I've gotten through the Marilyn Manson material that I was really excited to cover. I have really laid out my thoughts on fascism in an explicit and well done way. I've made a more kind of eccentric, random sort of high presentation documentary style video. Of course, there's still a lot of videos I want to make. But, I don't know if I feel that, because for a while I was feeling, well, as much as I would like to, exit this universe, there's like things that I want to get done before I do so. Things that are like making me not necessarily want to live, but like want to postpone not being alive. But I don't know if I feel that way anymore. I think I'm probably, as far as videos goes, anyway, probably okay. Maybe there's some like relationship stuff in my life that I haven't really lived to the fullest yet. Maybe I'd like to. But yeah, I mean, I'm just sort of floating along now, I guess. I've been that way for a little while, Late last year, I went through a pretty major shift in the way I handle life. Lou Diaz says hi there. But I kind of I just try not to really do anything anymore. I guess I let things happen. But I'm kind of renouncing a lot of attachments. I'm trying to, well, not trying. I'm just sort of giving up, like I'm just clearing out all those things that, like, those little ideas that you have of, oh, this should be this way. Whatever this says, bro, I'm just scared that you blow up. And if I say anything, it will be real forever. Scary. Heart, I'm scared. I don't see what you're so scared about. Like, are you scared that my channel is gonna get popular or something, and that like if you say stuff on my streams, people are gonna give a shit? Like, that's like the dumbest thing to be worried about, bro. That's like, who even cares? Nobody. Like if I blow up, in a manner of speaking, that's not gonna fall on you just because you commented something on my stream. There's not gonna be any fallout from that. The thing is, I sometimes wonder if I get popular, are people going to actually like harass me in real life? Are people gonna like swat me and stuff? People gonna like find where I live? Lou Diaz, I don't know what the other guy's trying to say, to be honest. But the thing is, like, I feel like a lot of people who have those problems, their problem is that they're not very good at handling online harassment. And because they're not very good at handling it, it gets worse. Because when you harass someone and they take it badly, then you know you're doing it right. But I don't know if I really have that weakness. Probably not, because your videos are really dense. I don't know. And I think, here's the thing. Oh, Cosmic says, I don't ever want to be too well known. Or well known. I would like to be well known. But here's the thing about me. I just think that I don't get into really stupid drama. Like, I think, I guess I'm glazing. I think that Ethan Klein's problem. I meant known. Yeah, I figured that's what you meant. I mean, that's how I read it at first. I think Ethan Klein's problem is that he has this podcast that's all about drama, and he's always getting involved in some stupid shit every week. With every fucking YouTuber, he has to make fun of the drama. He has to offer his opinion on it, even if he doesn't really know them or know anything about them or their situation. And so, like, yeah, now, because of that, and because he, like, got, like, weirdly chummy with Hassan Piker, even though it was obvious from the beginning that that guy was a nuthead. Like, what do you expect at this point? Now people are attacking your family. I mean, just don't, don't bring all of that heat. Don't be, like, inviting all of that heat onto yourself all the time, you know? It's okay to offer some perspective on issues relating to drama. But, like, he just, like, totally whored out the entire system. Like, he made so much money off of other people's problems. And I just don't think I do that. The thing is, like, I could have an issue with someone like Tick History, for instance. I can insult him because of what I think he's doing wrong on YouTube. But I think if I got in an actual conversation with him, I would do my best to be nice to him. And I think that when you look at, you know, and if he had like a personal problem, right? Like if he had like a relationship with his girlfriend that blew up, and then she, like, posted a bunch of drunk rants on Twitter or whatever the fuck about him, I wouldn't just jump on that and be like, yeah, this is my chance to, like, dig the knife a little bit deeper into this guy who I've had a problem with. To me, that's like a thing where, okay, there's a situation going on. I don't know every detail about the situation, so I'm not going to judge it. But I think a lot of people are really quick to make judgments and, like, come up with opinions on stuff, and then they'll often change their mind later. And it's like, if you changed your mind later, why did you come out with such a hot take from the beginning? But this is how it works, and it just feeds this harassment narrative. And it's like, suddenly you have this feeling like, oh, I'm being harassed. What did I do wrong? But I think in most cases, like, you did do something wrong. You brought this on yourself by just continually poking that bear. And I just don't think that I do that. I think I don't have strong opinions. I have controversial opinions. I have perspectives that other people really don't like to hear. But I don't cling to them vigorously. And I think I'm fairly polite about them for the most part. Sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I try to be entertaining. It doesn't always work. I'm not very good at rants. At least not scripted ones. I can probably do some impromptu ones okay. But so I just don't know. I'm curious to know if I become more popular than I am. Like, what is that going to do to me? What is my reputation going to be? Like, how are people going to take it? I'm very curious about that, because I don't really know. You didn't miss anything, Carl, too. It's just been depressing. Lou Diaz says, I think that if you look at public figures like Hassan or H3, they have iconography that people can attach themselves to. People either love it or hate it. Iconography? Huh? You saw the poetry videos. Yeah, well, they're not exactly. I don't have a poetry playlist anymore because I don't really like most of those videos. I like the recent one I did. Um, what was it called? Long Live the King, because I liked the style I did that one in. The other ones where I'm talking to the camera, I was never comfortable doing those. I don't know why. I don't know why I chose to do them that way. I should have just done voiceover. I think it was a holdover from an old idea I had about poetry reading videos that ended up not coming to fruition, and so I kind of reworked it into something that I didn't really care for. You liked them? Well, I think the poems are good. But I don't have that playlist anymore, so they can be hard to find because they're all just sort of they're named after the title. Like I have The Dog and The Great or Good / Edgelord, and then I have one that's like Sublime Delights and Trial of Sophos, which that's probably my least favorite one. That one just did not turn out very good. And then, although I really like the Sublime Delights as a poem, I think it was a good poem. Just don't think I said it well. And then the one other is the compilation, Poetry Cringe Compilation one. And that one I was kind of trying to be cringe. I just leaned into it because I didn't know what the fuck else to do with that video. So I just like made fun of myself in it, which is weird. It turned out weird. I've never really known what to do with my poetry videos until now. I don't know why it took me so long to figure out how to do it. Because the Long Live the King one turned out fine. And it was very simple and easy to make. Your channel is really underrated, says Cosmic. Well, I feel that way too, you know. I want I want some, you know, some more eyeballs at least. I want people to like know that I exist. So then, you know, if they decide they want to watch me, they at least have that option, you know. You are talented with music too. Sorry, I'll stop glazing. You can keep glazing. If you want to hear some music, I can play some. There's one song that I've been playing a lot lately. It goes like this. Farewell to your bricks and mortar. Farewell to your dirty lying. Farewell to your gangers and gangplanks, and to hell with your overtime. For the good ship Ragamuffin is lying at the quay for to take old Pat with a shovel on his back to the shores of Botany Bay. I was on my way down to the quay where the ship at anchor lay, to command a gang of navvies that they told me to engage. I thought I would stop in for a while before I went away, for to take a trip on an emigrant ship to the shores of Botany Bay. Farewell to your bricks and mortar, farewell to your dirty lying. Farewell to your gangers and gangplanks, and to hell with your overtime. For the good ship Ragamuffin is lying at the quay for to take old Pat with a shovel on his back to the shores of Botany Bay. When the boss came round this morning, he said to me, you know, if you don't mix your mortar right, I'm afraid you'll have to go. Well, since he did insult me, I demanded all my pay, and I told him straight I was going to emigrate to the shores of Botany Bay. Farewell to your bricks and mortar, farewell to your dirty lying. Farewell to your gangers and gangplanks, and to hell with your overtime. For the good ship Ragamuffin is lying at the quay for to take old Pat with a shovel on his back to the shores of Botany Bay. And when I reach Australia, I'll go and dig for gold. There's plenty there for the digging up, or so I have been told. Or else I'll go back to my trade, and 100 bricks I'll lay. For 8 bob I live for an 8-hour shift on the shores of Botany Bay. Farewell to your bricks and mortar, farewell to your dirty lying. Farewell to your gangers and gangplanks, and to hell with your overtime. For the good ship Ragamuffin is lying at the quay for to take old Pat with a shovel on his back to the shores of Botany Bay. Farewell to your bricks and mortar, farewell to your dirty lying. Farewell to your gangers and gangplanks, and to hell with your overtime. For the good ship Ragamuffin is lying at the quay for
to take old Pat with a shovel on his back to the shores of Botany Bay, the shores of Botany Bay.
The poems are lovely. I've been putting poems in the descriptions of my videos too. The ones where I don't have any other description available. New South Wales, that's where that is. Yeah, is New South Wales in Western Australia? Not the state Western Australia, because I think there's a state called Western Australia, but like, is it like to the south of Western Australia? Is what I mean, like in that part of Australia. Because there's like 3 states that I know that are kind of in the south that are like more densely populated. There's New South Wales, there's Queensland, and there's Victoria, I think. And then there's Western Australia, and I don't know what the other ones are. Okay, I was wrong. It's in the east. I forgot I had these earbuds. I also have this tablet under my laptop here. I was given this. I've never turned it on. I've had this for like 2 months or something. I don't even remember how long it's been. I haven't done anything with it. I thought the song was great. It's a good song. I like the amount of lyrics in it, and I like the word immigrant in that song. I like the way it's used. It's used twice in the same portion. It's like for to take a trip on an immigrant ship to the shores of Botany Bay, and then in the second verse it's I told him straight I was going to immigrate to the shores of Botany Bay. I like how they repurposed this word in a very satisfying way. I can't tell accents, and I think it's Irish for some reason because I'm an American. Well, it is, I believe. I think it's a song that was written in Ireland, or it could have been written in Australia. But it was definitely written by an Irish person, whether it was in Ireland or Australia. Because the name Pat is used in it, or in some versions of it, not all versions. And that's an Irish staple name, you know. You hear that in Pat or Patty are in a lot of songs. My personal favorite region of Australia, Northern Territory, most remote and desolate part of it. I imagine that's where the black people live. Patty Man. I guess Patty is also a name for like a policeman. Or something like that. Paddy Wagon. I just know that what's his name? Paul Dano sings that song in 12 Years a Slave. Where he's like, run, nigga, run, or the Patty gonna get you. I'm not into Irish people, but I just like... What? How do you pronounce that? What is that? Patty's short for... Not even gonna try to pronounce that. Not even gonna try to pronounce that. Irish names are impossible to pronounce. It's just a channel on YouTube, okay. Well, I don't really want to watch anything right now, but I guess I can see how it goes. What a strange song.
The fragility of human civilization is a profound lesson we learn from the 20th century.
Yeah,
At the start
tired
of that
living. I bet you're probably tired of living. You're the guy who's the Arab atheist guy, aren't you?
Something tells me he hasn't watched the show.
What
It
the
also
fuck
doesn't know
just
artists
happened?
have their own style.
I fiddled with my earbud for a second and it just skipped to the next video on the playlist. That's ridiculous. That makes me mad, man. All right. Anyway. Is the channel on your screen the people that made the Nothing is Punk Anymore vids? Yeah, that one video. It's made by the other guys. So this is a husband and wife who do this channel. And so the guy made that video, and this is the wife, I think.
At the start of that era, there was widespread optimism that progress in technology and morality would go hand in hand. People believed that humanity would become increasingly wealthy.
So what video are we watching today? This one. This is all I know about it. It's just the title. So, I don't know. I don't really know anything more than you do.
Healthy, and ultimately happier. Wisdom, it was assumed, would naturally follow.
I'm wondering if the resolution can be bumped up a bit, because this looks kind of bad. 720p. Don't want to overload it, but yeah, that looks better.
Without a doubt,
Oh, that was Mr. Beast there for a second.
humankind has achieved great things. On the grand scale, we are wealthier and healthier than ever. For instance, the life expectancy of a Brazilian peasant now exceeds that of a member of the Portuguese royal family during the height of colonialism. Poverty is no longer defined by an absolute lack of food, shelter, or clothing, but rather by relative comparison with the abundant life of the more prosperous. However, while progress has not been entirely illusory, the fear of regression has also proven justified. The Great War shattered the naive optimism that progress towards an utopian society was inevitable or even possible. The most civilized of people demonstrated their capacity for organized violence, claiming the lives of millions in unimaginable ways.
1953, that's when Stalin died.
Revolts against entire civilizations occurred throughout the 20th century. We experienced China's Cultural Revolution, the Khmer Rouge regime in Cambodia. So who can confidently claim that such horrors could never happen again? Right now, as I speak, children in the Congo are mining for cobalt to power the rechargeable batteries of the device you're using to watch this very video. Under this
That's why I haven't thrown away any of my electronics. I just have a pile of them waiting to get recycled. Because, yeah, fuck that.
circumstances, one might expect intellectuals who are assumed to possess deeper insight and foresight than ordinary.
Worst because I'm not Arab, but still suffering all the same. But I'm impressed you remember me. You're not Arab. Interesting. Your name from... I mean, it looks very Middle Eastern. But I guess names like that are common among non-Arab populations.
Ordinary individuals to be preoccupied with preserving the boundaries that separate civilization from barbarism. After all, these boundaries have proven remarkably fragile. However, one would be mistaken to assume so. Some intellectuals have willingly embraced barbarism, while others remain oblivious to the fact that boundaries require maintenance and at times vigorous defense.
I don't sleep. I eat like I have no friends, no social life, and I'm miserable.
Breaking taboos and transgressing norms have become praiseworthy in the modern
I think
critics'
that
vocabulary.
guy should start with trying to get sleep. Start with that. Invest in melatonin, see what you can do.
Regardless of the value or significance of the transgression. A reviewer of Peter Soto's Selfish Little
A lot of e-waste ends up in massive landfills in northern India where kids and others in poverty scrounge for the precious metals. I always wondered what was the leap that you made you create channel, because it's very cool what you doing, especially the ones on Manson. Well, I always wanted to be a YouTuber ever since I saw what a boundless new door had just been opened up. I'm Persian, if you want to know. So bad. Nice to meet you. Okay, I can see that. Yeah, I can see why you're not very happy with the state of things. Yeah. But as far as YouTube, you gotta understand, in 2011, 2012, blue carpets and gold per South Park. I'm not sure I get the reference. But in that time, YouTube as a sort of phenomenon had not reached the kind of heights and potential that it has reached now, where we've kind of seen what can come of it. But it was on this sort of track where you could look at it and go, whoa, this is fast doing these really interesting things. Like things that were not possible in the previous decade are now possible because of YouTube. People are using this to do stuff that goes well beyond, what I kind of had a concept of really prior to that point. It was this brand new, exciting, amazing thing, and it felt like I was getting in right kind of on the ground level to see where this would go. Like I was like, this is a brand new thing, and I'm really excited about it. Kind of like how it was when I discovered the really good AI image generation. It was like, wow, this is a huge new thing that's been opened up, and the potential of this is groundbreaking. And so I was always fiercely excited about YouTube, and I always knew that I wanted to get in on that action, but I didn't know exactly what that would look like, and I had different ideas about what it would be over the years, but the idea of getting in on that action never left my mind. It was always really front and center that this is what I've wanted to do with my life. Anything else can go anyway, but this was my life goal, to start this channel, So I'm living the dream, I guess. Some dream.
For example, praised Soto's alleged disregard for convention as a virtue in itself, without specifying the particular convention he was breaking at all. The reviewer considers Soto's unconventionality in itself inherently praiseworthy. Yet whether it was virtuous or vice-ridden depends on the ethical content and societal impact of the convention in question. Nonetheless, opposition to traditional social rules is what elevates the modern intellectuals in the eyes of their peers. However, the recognition granted by scholars to the rejection of established morals or religious laws inevitably shapes the perspectives of those who are not intellectuals. What is celebrated amongst postmodern bohemian types eventually permeates the lives of unskilled workers and welfare recipients, those most in need of boundaries to improve their lives or beauty to provide hope for change. The outcome is moral, spiritual, and emotional poverty, an empty life of fleeting pleasures and prolonged suffering. Instead of empowering people to demand better standards, we simply brush it off like that doesn't matter at all.
Whenever he's dancing, I feel happy, I have joy watching him dancing.
We think we are free because we can stuff our faces with fast food. We can get addicted to pornography as early as 8.
I mean, the thing is, you're stuck in this life, you're put on this earth without your will, and you just gotta make the most of it. And so for most people, that is taking advantage of what they have rather than kind of whining and complaining about what they don't have, even though they do that too. But the distinction is, like, it's a lot easier to live and a lot more pleasant if you know how to appreciate what you have, basically. And so, you can view this as like a big problem that we don't have the kind of motivation to make our world better. But I don't think we ever really have. I think people in various epochs of history have been driven by desperation to do things. Or, you know, they didn't really have much going for them anyway in previous epochs, and so they were there. It wasn't like they were risking much. I think people are a lot more comfortable these days than they used to be, and you can look at that as a bad thing, or you can look at that as a good thing. I don't really see it either way. I just think it's natural. Do you know where does this channel stand politically? I have a suspicion that the two creators of this channel have different political beliefs. I don't imagine that this channel is kind of, that they agree on everything and they have the same ideology. But maybe they do. I'm not sure. I happy you did, sincerely. Well, very nice.
8 years old, dance
www.porn.
to the trendiest and increasingly shorter tunes, and take big pharma pills to cure man-made diseases. But it's okay, we are wearing blue light glasses to prevent our eyes from frying while we doom scroll our favorite social media. This type of transgression kink is so prevalent in our intellectual modern mindset that we just simply accept any form of degeneracy as the new big thing. Why bother that mainstream music is getting increasingly more empty? After all, it's transgressive. Why bother that our museums are becoming soma-inducing light shows? It's transgressive. Why bother that our children are getting exposed to extreme content?
I'm not a museum goer, I guess, because I guess that's a subculture that I don't have much experience with. You know, as far as music, like, is it getting emptier? I think that's very much a matter of opinion. That mainstream music is getting emptier. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if empty is the right way to describe it.
On the internet is transgressive. There's someone somewhere, I'm sure, being liberated by all kinds of degeneracy that we just brush it off nowadays, so as to not be seen as too traditional, so as to not be seen as stuck up, and God forbid, to have standards. To be very clear, not all criticism of social conventions and traditions is destructive. In any society, there is much deserving criticism. However, those critics must recognize that civilization requires preservation as much as it needs change.
Mainstream music has never been particularly thought-provoking, to be honest. Well, sometimes it is, though, when you don't expect it. Even today. But I don't know if being thought-provoking is really what, like, is really important for music. I mean, I love Marilyn Manson, you know, and I love good lyrics. But Marilyn Manson was popular back in the day, so I don't know. And I feel like there's other stuff today that is smart, that is popular. I don't know. I've heard things about this Tyler, the Creator guy. I don't really know anything about him, but I've heard that he's smart. You're an art museum goer? Yeah, I've been to a few art museums. It's all a matter of subjective taste. Yeah. Why did she throw in a clip from Salo there? I guess because Salo is a transgressive movie. Wait, where was the Salo clip? I only saw Clockwork Orange. I like that. Clockwork Orange. Yeah, a few seconds ago there was a Salo clip. The feelings matter more with music, arguably. Yeah, I think good lyrics are they really elevate music considerably. However, I think often lyrics that aren't very complex can also be really good. Like, because they accomplish a certain goal that they're trying to accomplish. Like, I think that the lyrics even of something like TikTok by Kesha are pretty good because they're funny and they have this sort of wry charm to them where you're not really sure, like they're taking the piss, to use an English expression, in a way, with this character that they're creating of Kesha, who's this party girl. Wake up in the morning feeling like P. Diddy. Which, of course, these days I think that line hits even better because of what we know about P. Diddy now. But she's like, all the dudes are lining up because they think we got swagger, but we kick them to the curb unless they look like Mick Jagger. It's such a stupid line because it's clear that they only reference Mick Jagger because his name rhymes with swagger. Which was very popular at that time. There were several songs that did that rhyme for some reason. I guess the word swagger was popular back then. But it paints a picture. The lyrics of that song are very evocative, and they tell you about, okay, this is this kind of drunk bimbo party girl who wakes up and immediately decides to get drunk and party, and then throws up and falls asleep and then rinse and repeat the next day. There's a story being told there, and it's fun, and you can get into the kind of spirit of that as in the same way you can get into a movie that tells a story that, even if it's not a story you can particularly relate to, it's still just kind of fun to get a peek into someone else's life. Like the movie Goodfellas. I'm sure a lot of us can't really relate to that movie very well. But it's still kind of fun to get a peek into this weird, degenerate world of the mafia. And so, even songs that are kind of famous for not having very smart lyrics. I don't think your lyrics have to necessarily be smart or intelligent to be good. I think being good is about more than that. It's about accomplishing something that you set out to accomplish in a way that's satisfying. Transgression for transgression's sake is celebrated in the mainstream. For example, Salo. Yeah, that's not mainstream. I don't know. Kesha made the same rhyme. Well, that's what I was talking about. I was talking about her use of that of that rhyme. There was also Maroon 5 in Moves Like Jagger, and then there was another British song. I can't remember who it was, but it was called Swagger Jagger. It also isn't just transgression for transgression's sake. It's done for very clear reasons. Yeah, I guess. All right.
Moderate criticism, or criticism driven by utopian ideals, can inflict great harm, even devastation. No individual, regardless of brilliance, can single-handedly deduce all knowledge, rendering the wisdom of previous generation useless. To think otherwise is to indulge in the most egotistical intellectual arrogance. The same type of intellectual arrogance that once made it possible for great postmodernist minds to sign a petition calling for an extreme reformation of the laws of consent in France in 1977. In the realms of art, we witness a parallel decline in standards of quality that mirrors the fragility of the standards of our civilization. As boundaries blur and taboos are broken in the name of artistic expression, there seems to be a disregard for the timeless principles that uphold the true essence of art. The pursuit of novelty and shock value has taken precedence over the pursuit of meaning, beauty, and even craftsmanship. The shift has resulted in a plethora of works that prioritize provocation over substance, leaving audiences longing for the profound and the sublime. The decline in the quality of art can be attributed in part to the influence of intellectuals and critics who celebrate transgression for transgression's sake. The notion that breaking social norms inherently elevates an artwork has led to a proliferation of shallow and sensationalistic pieces. The pursuit of artistic excellence has been overshadowed by the pursuit of attention, leading to a devaluation of the traditional virtues that once defined art. On top of that, the commodification and
I think there's a dialectic going on, and I think that I think eventually novelty becomes boring. But, you know, what we're seeing here is kind of, I think, with the modern art movement, which has been going on for a really long time at this point, this sort of postmodern or modern, whatever you want to call it, this sort of deconstructionist art. I think that what you're seeing, part of it is genuine aesthetic value. Like, I think Picasso, you know, who got a lot of flack in his time for his art being ugly. You can look at a lot of what he did in those later works of his and see that, no, he was actually trying to express an aesthetic that these days you look at it and you think, oh, actually it does have an inherent appeal of its own. At the time, it looked really transgressive and weird and ugly. But now you can look back on it after we've seen a lot worse examples of that and see, oh, actually, no, there was something to that. And so part of it is I think people genuinely looking for new ways to get aesthetic satisfaction out of art in novel ways. But I think there's also, when it comes to the art community, there is a sort of new elitism about transgressive art. So it used to be that, like, the old art elitism was like, oh, art has to conform to standards. But now the new elitism, which isn't really any different from the old elitism, is like, now art is best when it doesn't conform to any standards, which is kind of its own new standard. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's just a dialectic. I think that, novelty is desired, and then like sincerity is also desired, and we have both these days. A lot of people act like it's kind of one or the other, that like, oh, all modern art is like this thing on the left here. But there are a lot of artists who paint more like the one on the right, still to this day. It's just maybe their stuff doesn't have as much cultural capital these days. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if I really am much of an art fan anyway, as far as this kind of art, like painting. I really appreciate art for its historical value. Like, when I go to art museums, I'm interested in looking at the art and thinking about and just sort of pondering the historicity of it. That's interesting to me. And I can appreciate technique and all that as well. But I don't know if I see art as sort of this kind of art, like painting and sculpture, as sort of the big focal point of high culture. I think movies are more where it's at these days, because they're a lot more sophisticated. There's a lot more to them. But there are some interesting things about painting as well. I mean, if want to talk about transgression, Serbian movie was really going there. Yeah, I kind of want to watch that movie because a lot of people really are offended by it. And people who are not typically offended by movies are offended by that movie. I'm curious. I mean, I've seen a synopsis of it on like the controversial movies Iceberg a while back. Enter the Void, sorry. Reminds me of Yoko Ono's art. I feel like she tried to compensate for lack of talent by being crazy. I don't know. I don't know what the psychology of Yoko Ono is. I think it's very easy to make a lot of assumptions about people based on their art. But I can see things in a multifaceted way. I think Dali is a better example. I'm just a guy. This whole line of thinking being presented is undermined by the inherent subjectivity of art. Yeah, I mean, I can't say that I don't know what these people are talking about and understand where they're coming from. Because I'm not a fan of this style on the left. I much prefer the style on the right. But I just think there's this way of talking about it that irks me. This kind of arrogance that a lot of people have about it. It's difficult to really explain the issue while taking into account both sides. A Serbian film is alright. I've seen it a couple of times. I thought it was just kind of try hard. Alright.
Commercialization of art have further eroded its quality. The demand for instant gratification and market success has incentivized artists to produce works that cater to popular trends rather than pursue genuine artistic integrity.
At $98 million.
But what is artistic integrity? It's like, what do you even mean by that? Because I think these days a lot less art is made. As far as like when you look at the amount of art being produced and the percentage of that art that is made for a commission, it's much lower today than it used to be. So that would imply that today people are more free to do what they want and what they actually feel amounts to self-expression these days. And so this is what you get from that. This is the result of that. Whereas before, people were more limited by needing to make art that was for someone else, not for themselves. So I don't really know what you mean by artistic integrity, Because I think a lot of people interpret artistic integrity as like honest self-expression, but that's not what was going on so much back in the old days when people were making the kind of art that this person is saying is good art or worthwhile art. So what is integrity to this person is my question, I guess. Like, what does that concept even mean?
The hammer is up, sir.
I think it's very easy for people to throw out terms like artistic integrity without defining them. But then you have to define them. Because it's not clear.
On this side of the room, it's Yuki's bit of fair warning and selling. Thank you, sir.
Oh, woe is me, we're losing our hold to standards and tradition. It's a pretty absurd leap to say art used to be good, now there's bad art being made. This is a sign of our species degenerating. I think Forever Dirt is the only person that would make me understand why streaming is okay. Why streaming is okay? It also ignores that what this person thinks of as good art is probably still being made. They just haven't bothered to look for it. Yeah, I mean, I think that when people complain about stuff like this, you know, a lot of the time the stuff that they want is being made. It just doesn't have as many eyeballs on it. And it kind of makes you wonder why that is. I'm glazing again. All right.
$498 million. Thank you, Yuki. Congratulations. Thank you very much.
Art becomes reduced to a mere product, manufactured for mass consumption, rather than a reflection of the human experience, a true mirror of the human condition.
Well, when you look at this kind of art, this is not for mass consumption. This is for a very wealthy crowd of basically speculators. It's sort of like it's a hobby that a lot of rich people are into, this kind of I guess culture capital. It's good for artists because they get to make a lot of money off of their work. But I think a lot of people resent this kind of hobby because they see it as like everything that's wrong with rich people and how out of touch they are with the human experience and blah, 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 blah. I don't really judge it that harshly. I just think it's a hobby that some people are into, but it's definitely not mass consumption.
In this race for popularity, depth and quality,
it's a niche thing, but it's a very kind of high-profile niche thing just because these people are so wealthy they can afford to really publicize this stuff in an ostentatious way.
Often take a back seat.
I'm not the whiskey you want.
I deal with these kind of people in the film community constantly. It makes me want to uninstall my consciousness. I think art has become more personalized and tailored to each of us needs, moods, and feelings. Art is question mark, but real question mark is, do we even need art anymore? Like Death of God, do we need God? I mean, I think that I think we need creativity of our own, and we need to have stuff that we can appreciate that other people have made. I think that's quite essential these days, especially. Probably more so than ever. Honestly, though, I think the forever cleaning up blood robot is cool. Actually, it reminds me of that whole scene in Holy Mountain movie 1973. I don't remember which scene you're talking about. I didn't care for that movie all that much, to be honest.
And so transgression becomes a double-edged sword. With the rejection of established conventions and the rise of relativism, the criteria by which we evaluate art becomes increasingly subjective and arbitrary. The absence of objective benchmarks for excellence allows for the proliferation of mediocrity and the shortage we see of modern artworks of aesthetic accomplishment. The lack of critical discernment and a reluctance to uphold standards in art has led to a culture of artistic relativism, where personal preference trumps artistic merit, and the identity of the artist trumps the message of the art.
I'm okay with it, though, I think. Because I just don't give a shit. I like good stuff that appeals to me. But if other people want to like a bunch of bullshit that doesn't appeal to me, whatever, it's their life. I just don't think it's necessary to say that, everything has to be tailored to our tastes, specifically people who like more traditional art. And, I'm one of those people. Sometimes it's fun to kind of slum it in some more basic and, less hoity-toity areas of consciousness. I think that's healthy too. And I like having the option, There are things that, maybe aren't so wonderful about it. For instance, I think that the proliferation of cheap clothing has made it so that people don't have as much motivation to dress nice anymore. And so you're walking around in a world full of people who aren't really dressed all that nice anymore. And, that affects your general mood, I think, the general feeling you have going through your life, that things aren't quite as... the standards aren't quite there anymore. And that subliminally affects the way we feel about life in the world. But I wouldn't have it any other way. I think it's a very natural thing. And it's an okay thing overall, It's just that there's positive and negatives to everything. There's going to be drawbacks to everything. I think a lot of times people get obsessed with the drawbacks and they don't realize, what the point of change is. They think that change always has to be good, but it's never going to be that way. That just doesn't make sense. It's not how change works. Hey, I'm here. Objective, that word again. Drunk. We all gotta slum it up and hang loose sometimes, but not all the time. Balance in all things is the way. Time and place and all that. I certainly think that's the most satisfying way to live. Having kind of a mix of things.
But to snob years of artistic tradition and aesthetic excellence is a fool's endeavor, and the consequence of this decline in the quality of art extends far beyond the artistic sphere.
I'm going to, let's see, turn it and try not to get it on Amy's sweater, and I'm going to flick it.
Ooh.
Is that not fantastic?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's cool. Okay, hold on. This is what I'm going to do. That one's done.
Art has always played a pivotal role in shaping culture and society, serving as a reflection of our values, aspirations, and collective identity. When art loses its ability to inspire, question, and uplift, society suffers. It deprives us of the transformative power of art to elevate our souls, deepen our understanding, and provoke meaningful dialogue. In a world increasingly characterized by superficiality, polarization, and instant gratification, the loss of truly great art is a tragic reflection of the loss of our shared humanity. This calls for a renewed sense of individual responsibility.
We're seeing all these movies. I think movies are still in a really good period as far as the artistic value of them. Like, I really like what A24 has been doing, and I really like that they built this whole brand on making like artistically resonant films that feel like they all had a purpose and none of them are sequels or remakes. So I think movies are doing really well right now. I think that just because of how expensive a lot of the blockbusters have gotten, like the rise of the blockbuster in general, has had certain consequences about the way we feel about movies as a culture. And so, you know, the movies that are ubiquitous and everyone's talking about them tend to be kind of mediocre these days because of certain things relating to the amount of money that's spent on them and what people prioritize when spending that money. They don't want to spend it on a risky project. Like a movie like Rocky would not become the highest grossing movie of the year anymore. That era is over. And I miss that era. You know, I miss when a movie like Tootsie could be like one of the biggest money-making movies of the year. I miss that. But like I said, you know, change just... Not everything is going to go exactly your way with change. A lot of things are going the right way, I think, with movies. But people don't pay attention to that, or they don't acknowledge that, really. And they just have this kind of warped picture of what's going on. Because people are obsessed with the sort of bad aspect of change. And they don't think about, like, what the whole picture is. Right? Times they are changing, as Bob Dylan once said. The past year was great for movies, especially horror. Solve et coagula. Goal of life.
It is imperative that we recognize the role we play in shaping the cultural landscape and actively strive to be better. We must resist the allure of novelty and transgression for its own sake, and instead seek depth, meaning, and craftsmanship in our artistic endeavors. By upholding and promoting the time...
Like, I think the proliferation of the blockbuster and the Marvel movie has led to the need for people to create a brand like A24. There wouldn't have been that motivation to create that kind of brand as a statement without that problem. So it's all a dialectic. I think people are trying to kind of fill whatever gaps they can find. And as long as there are people with that sort of ingenuity and desire to fill those gaps, they will eventually get filled and we'll see interesting results. There's always interesting stuff going on. And I think that just the expansion of culture in the last 130 years or so has led to a lot of gaps forming and being filled. I just think culture was a lot smaller in the old days. It didn't exist as much as it does now. And so you got more of a conformity that leads to this sort of idea of there being this past where things all made sense and people knew what the standards were, and now it's all being deconstructed and leading to this feeling of emptiness. But fuck it, deconstruct it.
Timeless principles that define Grey are, we can contribute to the restoration of its transformative power and its
lacking a holistic view, missing the forest for the trees, navel gazing. A lot of the critical drinker types will only watch Disney Star Wars and shit like that and then think all movies suck now because of that. Yeah, it seems like that's all they seem to actually fucking talk about. Like, one thing I like about YMS is he will watch those movies, but he also watches a bunch of other stuff. He goes to film festivals like the Cannes Film Festival and Sundance. Like, he actually goes to those shit, you know? He actually seeks out the stuff that other people complain isn't in the mainstream. But, why does it have to be in the mainstream? Like, does it matter? Really? If it's there, why does it have to be that everyone is watching it, Why can't it just be the thing that you like to watch? So YMS doesn't have... There are a lot of things I don't like about the way YMS appraises movies, but one thing I like is that he doesn't have that really just like, what do you call it? Just a dense perspective on film where you're just lazy and ignoring the whole picture. Because I just think that a lot of people don't get the spirit of change very, very easily. Read my words, I gotta piss, I'll BRB. Typical of humanity, democratization of culture. Yeah.
ability to inspire and provoke genuine reflection. The practical life of the world's underclass is extremely influenced by abstract ideas of misguided social critics of upper-class backgrounds. The truth is that intellectual and artistic life still holds immense practical importance. Practical man may not prioritize theoretical considerations, but the world is governed mainly by outdated ideas from economists, social philosophers, novelists, artists, and now even pop singers and influencers. They are the unrecognized legislators of our increasingly global society, and we ought to pay close attention to what they say and how they say it.
In Pallas's work, the impossible trajectory of hope becomes the ground where irony and advice dance together in frightening hallways, alive with languor and vitality. Screenland is the underground.
I don't understand anything that he's saying right now.
An overlay for consciousness.
We must embrace the wisdom of the past, while also engaging with the present, carefully considering the impact of our choices and contributions to our and society at large. By actively striving for excellence, authenticity, and meaningful connections, we can play a crucial role in the
I just like the diversity of stuff that there is these days. I mean, I guess part of why I don't like this sort of criticism is that it seems like they just want to just reduce everything back to the way it was before, when there was less culture. Culture was less expansive. There were fewer gaps to fill. I just have kind of a more is more mentality about it. Like, I like just things kind of breaking down into weird little areas that you didn't expect. I sort of like the degeneration of culture in a way. Like, something like Hell of a Boss is a weird thing. It doesn't fit into any previous idea of standards. It's kind of charting a new course, and you can see all the influence that went into it, but it's not really obeying any standards. It's kind of just a weird sort of broken down facsimile of a show. But there's something really kind of electric about it. You know? And I like that we're in a space where a show like that can exist, whereas before it couldn't. And I think a lot of people just are way too quick to skip over that perspective and that side of things and not really fully take in what we're dealing with. You know, what this moment means for culture, and what's, you know, why we've gotten to this point, why people have decided to take us to this point, where the need has come from of getting us to this point. There's just a lot of shallow lack of perspective going on here.
Revitalization and preservation of the cultural fabric that underpins our shared humanity.
What the critical drinkers of the world are really mourning is the loss of monoculture. Yeah, and the loss of like a mono counterculture, right? Where it's like, oh, we have a monoculture and then we have like an equally mono counterculture to rebel against the monoculture. It was very easy to understand. And because of that, it allowed for, I think, some more provocative things to become a lot more mass marketable back then. In a way, they aren't so much these days. They're a lot more niche. And so what's mass marketable now has kind of become a little bit less interesting as a result. And that leads to people having this kind of idea that we've lost something. But I don't know if we really have. We still have all the old shit that we used to have. You know, it's not like things have gone away. Like, I can still watch 2001: A Space Odyssey and appreciate it as much today as anyone could. I love you. All right. Do you actually love me? Like, would you fuck me?
Through these individual acts of responsibility and commitment, we can collectively navigate the challenges of the modern world and use our art to build a more resilient and flourishing civilization for generations to come.
All right. Well, that was an interesting video. That took us places. What if alt-hist anthropology of the left? That could be interesting.
One of my favorite
I'm a little bit hungry right now. I'm a little bit hungry. I think I should quickly go and make a bagel. I'll make it quick. I'll be right back. First, I want to read this comment, though. I think general population has become more sensitive or gets easily more offended, but what they don't understand or don't want to understand. I don't know. All right. Yeah, I don't agree with that, actually. I think people have always been really sensitive. All right, I'm not gay. Okay. I didn't know you were male. I'll be right back in 5 minutes. Okay, I'm back.
Underlying points that I've used about a dozen times on this show is that we know nothing about the things that we know the most about. This paradox exists since you can only understand what something is based upon its underlying context. Thus, if you exist too close to something, you can't look at it objectively, given you don't have enough distance to see it for what it's not. An easy example of this I think a lot of you would know from your daily lives is that you can be in a toxic romantic relationship without even realizing it, since you're so close to your partner. This is very true of anthropology today. That's since human societies are absolutely insane across the world and history. The more you look at how we humans organize ourselves, it's just incredibly fascinating. Between the Aztecs doing millions of human sacrifices to please the sun god, how many Islamic states had princes who were slaves, the West's ability to make godlike technologies,
This garlic bread hits right now. It's nice and moist.
or the Prophet Muhammad showing up and making the biggest empire in history up to that point out of nothing. It's just remarkable that it's all real. Furthermore, our society today is possibly the most absurd society ever in history. On top of this, there are so many very rapid social changes occurring right now that no one ever talks about. There's so much material to talk about anthropology if we put the slightest amount of effort into it. However, our society has no interest in how societies work. We believe pretty stupid ideas that were never tested, like the blank slate that human nature is all social engineering and is naturally good. Alternately, that all cultures work the same, and men and women are the same as well, and that culture is unimportant. This is so stupid, and people...
I don't think these beliefs are quite as ubiquitous as he's portraying them. I think most people have quite a bit of common sense. Sometimes with these right-wing figures, they're never sure whether they want to be like the voice of the common crowd or the one lone guy railing against the common establishment, you know? Does everyone agree with you, or is everyone, you know, going the wrong direction? I don't know. It's just something to think about, I guess. A room without books is like body without soul. Can you, like, do better than food? Book kind of review about your bookshelf. They look interesting from distance, like people. They look interesting from distance, like people. I'm not quite sure what all that was about, but I have done videos about my bookshelf in the past. I did a couple. This feels like a straw man of leftist thought. To some degree. To some degree.
People don't even realize how stupid it is. With all of this being said, we never study our own society anthropologically. What I once said to a friend is the reason we don't look for lessons in history is we know that if we found them, that we would be doing it really wrong, and we don't want to be held accountable. However, if we did the slightest amount of digging, we would find fascinating results from studying the anthropology of our culture. This is the first video of a two-part series. The next video that will immediately follow this one is on the anthropology of the right. We will be studying the right and the left as if we were looking at tribal peoples in the Amazon or the Congo. In this video, looking at the origins, strengths, weaknesses, and character of the left as a cultural formation. I can promise you the results will surprise you.
I'm curious. I'm sold on this video.
Part 1. What is left? I want to make it clear, and I think you folks already know this mostly, but I clearly have a dog in this fight. I'm known for being a conservative pundit who has said some negative things about the left in the past. First of all, finding a person without a political axe to grind today is nigh impossible. Even when centrists show up and try to openly be as centrist as physically possible, they get shoehorned in by the left and the culture in general into being part of the conservative coalition. Studies have found that the demographic breakdown of the population in America is 1/3 conservative, 1/3 leftist, and 1/3 politically inactive. They found in said study the apoliticals weren't principled political centrists, but rather anti-intellectual normie idiots. Secondly, what matters more than the political dog racing is the truth. If something is the truth, it's just the truth. You can stop there. If someone says something true, it doesn't matter what their motivations are or how they reach their conclusion. What matters is that they won the race to the finish line. Being fair isn't 50-50, an ideal our society sometimes pretends to, but we don't commit to. Being fair is saying the truth for what it is. The fact that we're operating off any other principle in direct opposition to the
Well, I don't know if fair is really the right word for it, but being accurate, I guess. Sure.
The West's intellectual heritage since the ancient world is a sign that we are a society that the left has already completely changed. We operate under a leftist philosophic worldview in a level where, at this point, even conservatives are working inside the left's logic. There's a book by Tom Holland called Dominion, and it's about how much Christianity influenced the modern world in every conceivable way you could possibly imagine. I made a previous video on this topic if people are interested. What Holland says is that Christianity has influenced the world so much so that even people who are purposely anti-Christian end up becoming indirectly Christian through taking Christianity's assumptions about the world without even thinking about it. The irony is that the anti-Christian left does this given the values of the meek being good, equality, progress, and utopia all stem from Christian thinking. We forget this, but go to India, China, or the Roman Empire, and they didn't believe any of that stuff. I'm going to argue here that leftism is what Christianity was to the whole of history is to the modern world. We fundamentally exist in a leftist world today. Every single thing someone says, the way they see the world, and even how the right acts is all based on leftist philosophy. There is basically no...
I agree with this. I actually agree with this. I can hear the rant about cultural degeneracy and decay already. Almost nobody thinks men and women are the same. Yeah, almost nobody. I think there are quite a few loud vocal voices who do believe that, but most people don't. Most people, believe what they see with their own eyes. It was in November. Yes, it was. Cultural Bolshevism. Cultural bullshitism. You would believe how uncommon sense is out there. You wouldn't believe, I think you meant to say. I'm way too into Forever Dirt. I'm just a dumb drunk. He is way more talented than me. I'm drunk. Cultural Christianity. Forever Dirt is a Marilyn Mason guy. See, I don't know why being drunk inspires you to be this vacuously talkative. Like, what is this verbal diarrhea here? Like, could you tone it down? I mean, I don't mind you leaving some drunk comments, but like, what is this shit, honestly?
nothing in our world today that is not leftist. In the same way that Christianity permeated the Western mind so much that you struggle to find anything that's at least not somewhat Christian. I think our world is so colored by leftist assumptions that we are all leftists. One of my friends likes to say, the future is whatever the left says. People can't conceptualize anything except the left's future of progress, social engineering, and equality. The right merely rejects this future, yearning for a past that never really existed, while the left are the only people with a comprehensive direction for tomorrow, even if it's an incredibly delusional view of the future. Let me use myself as an example. I am well known for being a libertarian rightist, which is the exact opposite of Marxism. However, I see Marx's influence on my ideas a lot. Marx was the first guy to look at the patterns in history to predict the future, which is what I do. Class analysis, something Marx invented, is something I do all the time and is a trademark for me vis-a-vis other intellectuals in the space. Marx talked a lot of the contradictions of the current ideological system and why there was an inevitable revolution that would form around an ideology that he has developed. Guess who predicts that there's going to be a revolution against the ideological contradictions of the current society while proposing a new ideology and a manifesto? Even while being his opposite in many ways, Marx still has a huge influence on me. Thomas Sowell has made a really fascinating point that's really stuck with me. He said in the modern world that what the left is clear, and whatever is not the left is the right. That the right basically shares no features across its coalition. When you look at the left, you see Marxist-derived ideologies which believe in a unified technocracy based around equality of all people, social engineering used to bring about utopia, wealth redistribution done through the state, the blank slate, among other things. That being said, when you look at the right, you find the Taliban, libertarian...
Not all of that is universal to the left, so that's not true.
Nazis, monarchists, Confucians, neocons, militarists, religious fundamentalists.
I will say that the right is a little bit more vague and diverse in their ideas about what a proper society should be. I think part of this is because the right tends to not be as rationalist as the left, and so they have less motivation to really cohere. And I think that they cohere actually socially better than the left because of that, because they put more emphasis on that kind of social cohesion or coherence than they do on the logical coherence. And so the left actually kind of divides itself by obsessing over logic. The right doesn't really obsess over that as much. And so you have situations like this where they all can kind of gather around a figure like Hitler or Mussolini. Even if, Hitler does things in a totally different way than they would have done them, still, like, what he represents is this kind of authority figure that they crave. An authority figure who is going to kind of represent the identity of the right. Even if it doesn't matter so much what he does. It more matters what he represents to them, and it can be a lot of different things. That's the strength of Donald Trump as well, I think.
And boomer cons, which are all shoved into the same box. These people really share nothing except support for some sense of tradition like and bullets. Opposition to the left's worldview. Mind you, in fighting against the left, they often develop similarities, as I said before, including some preferring to an older social order, even if the left has become the new status quo. What's been going on here is that the left has a shared proposition that they've been trying to conquer the world with for the last 200 years. Meanwhile, whoever happens to be in that place in that time who fights fights them, whether in World War II Germany with the Nazis, modern Afghanistan with the Taliban, or modern America with the Republicans, are whatever the right is positionally. The last 200 years have been the global battle between the right and the left. You see it as early as the French Revolution, then 1848, the World Wars, communism, and now the culture wars today. The amount of sheer ideological difference between leftism that happened during the French Revolution and modern wokeness is not that big. I read
irrationality, essentialism, identity, tradition, vitalism. The concept of an ideology is more important than the ideology itself, I think, on the right. This notion that they have an ideology that they don't even necessarily have. Words are like bullets was a South Park reference with Cartman.
A couple interesting books which compare the things radicals in the French Revolution said to the modern left, and it's really interesting. Ironically, the Marquis de Sade, who, as we all know, was a really nice guy, spoke about the depersonalization and the alienation that would come about from the sexual revolution, or human life, in a way that seems perfectly in touch with the most hedonic factions of the left today. If you want this explained better, read this text wall. The best book on this topic, although one that's admittedly difficult to read, is Fire in the Minds of Men by Billington. I'm going to reference it a lot for this video. It's a book on the 19th century origins of the modern left. He talks about how French thinkers in the 1820s like Saint-Simon talk about how we needed mass migration and liberation from the third world, which would cause a war of liberation to free the first world. He wanted to create a priesthood of the science, which would create secular religion to honor the discoveries of science. He wanted to create a new man, interchangeable from old cultural ties, and to have complete androgeneity between the sexes, pushing for something that sounds like trans. Every single thing in the modern left can be found in French thinkers 200 years ago, like Saint-Simon. In my opinion, he's one of the most underrated historical figures. Between the 30 Years' War and the French Revolution...
Yeah, people don't really talk about Saint-Simon, but he was really influential. When you read about 19th century history, his name comes up a lot. But people don't really bring him up anymore.
Western civilization was stuck in a conflict between Britain or France, that being underlined by capitalism versus mercantilism. From the Black Death until the 30 Years' War, it was Protestants versus Catholics. Before then, from the collapse of the Frankish Empire until the Black Death, the largest ideological struggle inside Western civilization was between the Catholic Church and secular authorities like the Holy Roman Emperor. These kinds of divides are completely normal over history, with other examples being the Optimates versus the Populares in the fall of the Roman Republic, or the Armagnacs and Burgundians in 14th century France. In each case, these ideological battles overlay some ethnic, regional, or class interest where ideology rationalizes it. As I frequently say, people just like killing each other and make up reasons to do it. Over the course of this video, we will explain what the underlying social, ethnic, economic, and psychological drives behind the modern left are. I think a lot of you guys will find this application of anthropological techniques normally used on other cultures when applied to the modern world fun. It's actually pretty easy to put all the pieces together, but y'all have to wait a second. What I will say is that there are two lefts over history. There is the Western left and the Eastern left. This is an idea I've developed myself when I looked at the history of leftism. I think Western left is the line from Rousseau through the French Revolution, then into Bohemian culture, Weimar, the 1960s, and now with wokeness. Meanwhile, Eastern leftism starts with Karl Marx, then Lenin, Stalin, and Mao, and now with the Chinese Communist Party. The Western left is more libertine, feminine, delusional, anarchic, gay, and green. The Eastern left is masculine, authoritarian, aggressive, statist, and direct.
Yeah, I guess I can understand what he means. My mind just goes to stuff like the Hong Kong protests, and I think, well, isn't that more like Western leftism? So it's a bit of a misnomer to call it Western versus Eastern leftism. I think I think the people who believe in the political compass shit will call it like authoritarian left versus libertarian left. I wouldn't even necessarily use those terms. But maybe I just don't know all that much about the Oriental culture. And so I don't have quite the perspective to really speak on this.
I actually think it's useful to study them as completely different movements, since they seem to be operating off.
Comedy is violence. Marquez the Divine. Last Man versus Overman. He fails to realize that there is the third way. It's called liberalism, not left, not right. Liberal. I don't know if I agree with that. I don't think that's the third way when we're looking at the way that this video is presenting the subject. Liberalism is within the left cultural tradition. And that's why he says that even conservatives behave and think like leftists. Because they are completely absorbed in the tradition of liberalism.
Off different trajectories. I've already made a video on the Eastern Bloc of leftism, that being the communism video. I've purposely tried to put different content in each video, and so there's lots of stuff I'm leaving out about the Western left, which you should watch that video to know on a deeper basis. Thus, this video will focus on the Western branch, or basically the Western leftists that we see fighting over the culture wars today. Antifa and BIPOC, not Lenin and Deng Xiaoping. The theme which we subtly teased out earlier, that the left can determine what is socially acceptable today, should be an important tell, which we'll gradually answer later. I think this is a really fascinating topic to cover, given what the left shows as its face and what's really happening under the hood are so different. The irony, and this is a feature, not a bug, is that what the left says they are and the truth are so different as to basically be opposites. Over the course of this video, we will look at the demographics, philosophy, and psychology of the left. Part 2, demographics. One of the tweets of mine that went the most viral, which got over 1 million views, was when I said I don't think the Jews are to blame for the left. Rather, I blame the Jews and women, Calvinists, and the bureaucracy. I think for each of these, they share some of the blame. As we will get into later, I'm going to throw in another group who were decisive to the formation of the left, the French. Although the French importance has shrunk over time, historically we have the illusion of knowing what the story is. The problem of writing about the present versus writing about the past is that we knew what happens afterwards. When you read enough about a particular era of history, you realize that people at the time were worried about 1 million different trajectories that just didn't happen. The feared Russian conquest of Europe in the mid-19th century, the French invasion of England, or a communist revolution in America, all of which serious people worried about. However, we can know what did or didn't happen in the past. For example, when I talk about historic conflicts, I can often distill it into a single variable. The parliamentarians versus the royalists in the English Civil War were bourgeoisie capitalists against the old gentry and nobility. The whites versus the red in the Russian Civil War was the Russian heartland around Moscow versus the fringes. The American Civil
I have to say, so far this video is not really very cringe. I was expecting something more, like, embarrassing. I guess because I think I saw, like, Vosh review one of his videos a long time ago, and it was pretty weird, pretty cringe. So I think that's what I was expecting from this, but so far it seems not too bad. He hasn't really said anything like that just reeks of just an embarrassingly bad analysis. All of this seems relatively fair, so far.
War was the slave-owning South versus the industrial North. There are at least 4 separate correlative trends that you can use to predict the demographics of the left. These are 4 separate trends that stack up almost perfectly onto the other, in America at least. I know things are kind of different in Europe. Those being cities versus countryside, managerial versus merchant class, low agency versus high agency, and female versus male. To explain all of these, if you look at a map of red states versus blue states, it's very clearly an urban versus rural map. The blue states are the states with the huge international cities. Places like New York City, Washington, D.C.
N-I-G-G-E-R Penguin. Remember the racist penguins from Hell of a Boss? That's what it reminds me of. They used to say better dead than red. They did, didn't they?
DC, Los Angeles, or Chicago. Chicago is a great example of this, in that in almost all cases, the rural areas of blue states, like downstate Illinois, upstate New York, or the Central Valley of California, are conservative. Meanwhile, cities in red states like Austin, Dallas, Kansas City, or Atlanta are blue. On a statistical basis, the strongest correlation by a significant margin for whether someone is conservative or progressive is that conservatives would rather live outside a town to have a larger house with more land, and leftists would rather live closer to the action and have a smaller home. This is an almost perfect urban versus rural proxy. The beautiful thing about the world is that there are multiple layers of causation always happening at once. The anthropological nature of cities establishes incentives in which you naturally see something like leftism show up. An important fact to keep in mind is that only since the Industrial Revolution do we see majority urban populations. I talk about this theme more so in my video on population collapse, but cities are anthropologically different in that, for example, ever since the ancient world, cities have always been incapable of demographically sustaining themselves without countrysides. On top of this, cities have always historically been atheist or agnostic and have been places of creativity and also moral degeneracy. This is since inside cities you can't use social ties to maintain moral standards. Humans evolved to live in small communities in which everyone knew everyone else. Cities remove that, thus allowing them to be creative systems which can produce lots of cool stuff, but at the expense of social stability. Keep in mind that there were certain people who had value systems roughly similar to the modern left in the pre-industrial world, but they tended to be cosmopolitan aristocrats. People like some Italian Renaissance humanist thinkers, Tolstoy, Marquis de Sade, or some ancient Greek thinkers like Epicurus. The reason there aren't that many parallels to the left in pre-industrial societies, in which almost every society before the Industrial Revolution is in the authoritarian right box of the political compass, is that all pre-industrial societies were rural. You can also map this correlation in that France was the first country in Europe which urbanized, building its entire elite around Paris due to the centralized monarchy. Thus, France was the first country in Europe to experience leftism or agnosticism, that being the French Revolution. After this, you can correlate the rise of socialism with urbanization, as you can see from this text wall. The other correlations make sense from looking at the urban-rural split. This is why the founding fathers of the left were all French. I am going to keep recommending the book Fire in the Minds of Men by Billington, but the entire first generation of leftist thinkers were all French.
There was also John Locke. He was pretty early, wasn't he? He was born in the 17th century, I think. So I don't know if they were all French, but yeah, a lot of them were.
Interesting side note here is that modern socialism came out of various sub-factions in the French Revolution. Inside the chaotic maelstrom that was leftist French revolutionary politics, the different political factions were literally made up of people who went to different cafes. Thus, you could map different factions of radicals based on the streets that the cafes they went to were. France had a 50-year demographic lead on the rest of Europe, which is a trend that goes back to the Middle Ages. What that means is that France consistently hits overpopulation 50 years earlier than the rest of Europe. This also explains why in the early 19th century, leftism jumped to Germany, Italy, and Poland after originating in France. Once those societies experienced population booms, this fusion is what created communism, or the eastern branch of leftism, as Marx was a Jew from the German Rhineland. If you look at a map of the modern Western left, or a subvariety which I colloquially call WEFism from the World Economic Forum, is that it almost perfectly maps onto Calvinism. Calvinism was a sect of Protestantism which believed that humans were born in sin and that most would be cast into hell, which we had no control over due to divine predestination. Calvinism was strong in the Netherlands, Scotland, Eastern England, southwestern France, the German Rhineland, Switzerland, or Berlin. After that, they populated the American Northeast, who in turn populated the Pacific North.
There's a lot of liberal thinkers that came out of Scotland and England, and the Netherlands had a strong liberal tradition as well.
West, or English-speaking Canada. If you compare the areas that supports modern globalist ideologies like the World Economic Forum or wokeness to Calvinism, it's literally just the same map. Calvinism involves a theocratic, educated elite, much like the professors who dominate wokeism. Calvinism had a small, anointed caste who had to fight on in a sinful world. This was so similar to the modern left's vision of the world that Thomas Sowell titled his book on the leftist view of the world, The Vision of the Anointed. The concept of castes, of the saved and sinners, also fits very closely with the modern woke creation of a racial caste system of oppression. Calvinists are also predisposed to messianism.
Are you educating us tonight? No, apparently What If Alt Hist is. I've watched 20 minutes of this video, and so far there's very little that I've had to object about. It's a surprisingly good video. I wasn't expecting it to be this lacking in objectionable analysis. It's captivating video. Yeah, it's not bad, honestly. It's not bad.
Or an attempt to build a utopia, or, as they called it in New England, a shining city on a hill. Calvinist societies pushed for equality, standardization, and state intervention to very strict levels. It was the 17th century's equivalent to the nanny state, in which you were fined for arguing with your wife too loudly. If you're interested in this topic, check out my videos on American regional cultures. There's also a different argument that the Quakers, another British Protestant sect, founded modern leftism, which, even though I am a Pennsylvania Quaker, I partly see, but I don't think it's the underlying cause. The Quakers pushed for women's rights, full suffrage, and the abolition of slavery. However, you look at the Quaker diaspora in both England and America, where they went for libertarianism and hyper-capitalism. Quakers pushed for classical liberalism or freedom of choice, while never going through social engineering. The soft-heartedness of the left and a lot of the ideas comes from the Quakers, though, but then it disseminated to other groups who actually pushed it. Then there's the popular argument that the modern left is founded by the Jews. Again, like all of the other arguments here, there is a strong element of truth. What I will say is that none of these groups are really responsible in that the left formed as an organic whole, incorporating discrete elements into its own thing. Jews have had a vastly disproportionate element in the creation of the modern left. This is especially pronounced in certain sub-regions and eras. For example, almost all of the postmodernist thinkers were Jews. Mid-century America, the rise of communism in Russia, or the Weimar era were also also very disproportionately Jewish. In my opinion, Kevin McDonald and Kurt Doolittle are the people who have made the best arguments for the Jewish element in the left. Basically, that you can
Kevin
trace certain
McDonald.
parts of leftist
Is that
philosophy
the guy who
either
wrote
to
the book on my shelf? Yeah, it is. He wrote this book called Culture of Critique. This is actually part 2 of a trilogy that he wrote about the Jews. I've read the introduction to this, which is like 70 pages long. And it's basically kind of a synopsis of his whole thesis of the book. I haven't read the rest of it, though.
towards a Jewish self-interest to protect themselves from nationalist governments, which have very frequently targeted them, or that the left is a projection of certain elements of Jewish society and philosophy. The Jews have always cared a lot about social cohesion and welfare inside their own communities. The Jews also have a bent towards messianic thinking that they are on the edge of reaching utopia, and if they are morally good, God will reward them with victory or confusing the good for the truth. Jewish culture also has an idea of criticism in which the prophets would do social criticism of the ills of society. Even though there is an element of truth, I think this argument gets pushed too far all the time. There are a couple counterpoints to also look at. The first is that the Jews are vastly disproportionate in literally everything, including the far right. Jews are only 1.5% of America's population and less of Europe's. I am of British and Irish ancestry, and I have lots of hyper left-wing relatives. It seems strange to think the Jews just brainwashed most white Western women. Wouldn't it make more sense if the Jews happened to supply ideas that
I think the Jews were also disproportionate in the fascist party. I think there was a bigger, it wasn't like a per capita thing. It was a bigger percentage of the fascist party were Jews than the overall Italian population
that fed into white women's self-interests. The problem is that if you factor the Jews into being the left, the equation just doesn't add up. You have too many ecosystems that had basically no Jews.
Is it a good book? I don't know. It was interesting. I don't know if it was good.
And yet still had the left. Look at China, the Spanish Civil War, Stalin purging the Jews from the Soviet Union, or why is Israel so conservative politically? The irony is that the Jews in politics tend to be moderate leftists, in that the people like Sam Harris, Steven Pinker, Saad Gad, Konstantin Kizin, Brett Weinstein, among others, tend to be the moderates. The raving insane people on the left are either our BIPOC brothers or white Anglos or other Europeans. If you removed all Jews from the West today, the left would just get crazier, given the Jews are a moderating force on the left. You would still have over 100 million white radical leftists. Ironically, this is proven by the left turning on the Jews recently with Palestine. This leaves the two final demographics which make up the left, which we will analyze in the next two sections independently, those being women and the bureaucracy. Part 3. The philosophy of power. The entirety of leftist philosophy is built on its most fundamental level by the idea of the blank slate, the noble savage, and the open view of humanity. These three ideas are actually the same thing, or that human nature is good by its natural form, and that social conditioning makes us bad. The lesson here that we really need to learn as a society is that the seemingly nerdy argument here about stuff like human nature can determine literally everything else about how you live your life. Philosophy matters a tremendous amount for everything. I used to not believe that, but I see it more and more every day, since your soul informs what you do with your life. As Steven Pinker said, the natural endpoint of the blank slate is that if human nature is naturally perfect, and how you engineer people determines everything, then totalitarianism is the immediate next logical point, given you need to perfectly engineer the perfect conditions to turn humans into saints. This idea is foundational to literally the entirety of the left. They view the human soul like a semiconductor chip that you rip apart and engineer to perfection, while it's really a garden that you have to gradually cultivate. The great irony is that literally no one with a...
But I don't think that... I don't think that this very violent idea of cultivating the new man, we could call it, I don't think that's as common on the left as this guy is portraying it. I actually think probably the majority of leftists would agree that, yeah, you have to take it more gently. You have to cultivate it like a garden. I think most leftists would actually agree with that premise rather than the, you rip the computer chip out and reprogram it. And I think if you observe actual leftists and the way they talk about this stuff, that's what you'll see. I don't know why this guy doesn't see that. Other than just him being biased against leftists and wanting to portray them this way so that he can, I guess, poison the well against them.
Scientific background believe these underlying assumptions of the left today. We live in this strange zombie culture, probably due to aging, in which everything is based upon the assumptions of the World War II era and the one that came right after, whether or not they actually make sense on any level today. Everyone in the sciences at this point believes that human nature is at least half genetic, that genetics informs biological race, sex, and class, which are all real, that human nature is ingrained in our blood as much as it is malleable. This is even what leftists in the sciences now believe. I'm curious to see how this imbalance will be resolved over the next generation or so, either by the left dying out or the left arguing that we need to use genetic engineering to create equality. I could see an ideology like that develop at the end of the 21st century for complex reasons I explain in this text wall. This is
and I also don't know how common this blank slate idea is on the left. I mean, he's asserting this like it's just the ubiquitous trait of left-wing ideology, but, I don't know how often I've actually heard it in my life. I've heard it, definitely. I've heard it from some people. I think SJWs tend to believe that quite a bit. What Evolved History would describe as woke people tend to believe it quite a bit. I think it's a bit of wishful thinking on their part. But I don't know how ubiquitous that is among the whole left, because I don't think that very radical contingent of the left-wing progressive population really is a good indication of what everyone's thought is on especially on these very sort of basic philosophical premises like nature versus nurture. I don't believe people are good in their essence. Neither do I. I don't think people are innately good or bad. I think people are innately self-interested, and that manifests in interesting ways that it can often give the appearance of lacking self-interest. I could see that. But how do you define good? Yeah, the good is a subjective thing, obviously.
Going to sound insane, so let me preface it with this. The author of Fire in the Minds of Men was a Princeton professor and a congressional librarian, so about as legit as you could get. This was also a time in which academia was overwhelmingly still left-wing, so not really a conservative bias. He also did a tremendous amount of research on this topic, studying all the founders of the modern left as individuals and seeing their life trajectories. The conclusion he came to is that the modern left came out of the 19th century German...
No one is good in their essence. I agree, most are amoral. I mean, I don't know if moral and good are the same thing. I think moral refers, the way I would use it, moral refers to a mentality or a philosophy regarding good and bad. And so I think most people are moral in that they believe in this idea called morality. But that doesn't mean that they are good.
Occult movement, or the Illuminati, which mixed with French revolutionary ideas. The Illuminati was a secret organization in late 18th century Bavaria. It exists upon a concept of atheism, in which there are no secret underlying truths. The idea was to create a false concept of secret underlying truths so as to create an incentive to get people to push for social equality and a simpler world. A theme that keeps on popping up in the book is that the left's ultimate aim is to push for radical
And see, Moral Oral is a good example of a character who is good but not moral. It's actually kind of ironic because he isn't a moral person. And you can see that because morality doesn't make any fucking sense to him. He doesn't know what is supposed to be good and bad because everything that people are telling him is good is very clearly bad. And so to him, it doesn't matter. Like, he has no sense of what is moral. But he is a good-hearted person, and the way he behaves naturally is to be kind and generous and all that. So that's actually kind of a good example of what we're talking about. He's like the opposite. Most people are moral but not necessarily good. He's good but not necessarily moral. There it is. I see what you mean. Why talking about the Illuminati all of a sudden? Well, the Illuminati was... I don't know why the Illuminati was so influential, but, for a secret society, they were weirdly influential. But they are a good example of left-wing beliefs back in the 18th century.
Simplicity, to erase differentiations of sex, class, religion, and nationality to make everyone the same. Interestingly, this goes back to Pythagorean philosophy, in which the founders of the early left were obsessed with Pythagoras, who founded a cult based out of mathematical principles in 6th century Italy. Everything the left does is projection, in which the outward mask they wear is the exact opposite of the underlying reality.
I would say most people are not kind or selfless. I agree. Yeah, I would agree with that. But, I see a lot of effort to be kind among people. I notice, especially in my job, there's a lot of politeness. So I don't want to be totally negative about the human condition because I see that there's a lot of effort made by a lot of people to fight back against this meanness that we all kind of have in us. But it's just very hard. What is my job? I work at Walmart and I interact with people who are picking up orders for themselves and picking up orders for other people, as well as the people who work there. So I do end up interacting with quite a lot of people during the day. And the kinds of interactions I have are typically very short. And in a brief period, you have to make a certain impression. And a lot of people make the conscious choice, I've noticed, to try to make a good impression. And I think that's a good thing, that's an important thing. Kinds of kindness.
When the left wants diversity, what they're trying to cover for is to get everyone to cooperate as interchangeable cogs in the machine that is bureaucratic civilization. You're not supposed to find pride in your ethnicity, region, family, community, or religion. Instead, submitting to the managerial global homo, a great term I have a text wall here to explain.
Homo?
To provide cover for this, they push diversity, which is also a weird, truthful psychic withdrawal from said global homo. This, again, fits the left left's strategy of causing a problem, then offering a solution to said problem, which makes the problem worse, and the cycle continues. Get rid of the police. Leftist political thugs replace said police. Remove white people's culture. Blame white people for not having culture, and then give them BIPOC brothers. To get back to that earlier thread, the Illuminati was relatively irrelevant and not the evil mastermind organization that conspiracy theories paint it to be. It was mostly an atheist social club for South German aristocracy and intellectuals. Ironically, the thing the Illuminati did that was the most important was die.
I see a lot of people putting up a front. I think that putting up a front is a good thing, though. And I think it's an important thing. So it's interesting. We can talk about, like, is humanity inherently good or inherently not good? But I see kind of both, because I think that there wouldn't be so much of a prevailing need and desire to put up a front if we didn't, on some level, really innately feel a necessity and importance of it and value that. Don't you call that pretending? Yes, faking it to you make it, going along to get along, keeping the peace. Yeah.
In that, out of its collapse came the formation of these different groups that were secret societies in Central Europe, which entered a period of Darwinistic competition, out of which the left came out of. They would combine the occult with political radicalism. This may sound crazy at first, but it makes a lot of sense once you start thinking about it. In that, this was a very religious society in which all educated people knew religious philosophy. Europe was also under the rule of a genuinely oppressive ruling class, which fused the church and state. Thus, to be against the state was also to be against the church. The French Revolution was coordinated through Masonic lodges, since the Masons were explicitly anti-Catholic, and their secret organizational abilities allowed easy coordination from the government secret police.
Know
For all these reasons,
that the Masons were anti-Catholic. Especially because I think that Catholics are allowed in the Masons. The only stipulation is that you have to believe in God. I think you can be a Muslim or whatever and still be a Freemason.
Since the idea that the left stems from these occult movements makes a lot of sense. And this is a conclusion from about a dozen different authors who have studied this topic have each independently come to. This is something serious historians agree with. However, I won't say that just because the left was founded by these occult groups, that makes it bad. Modern science is an extension of alchemy, which was largely the same thing, as you could say with Protestantism. There was a time when the Christians were a heretical, outlawed occult group. The major...
I'm noticing in this video that, yeah, while he does kind of succumb to certain right-wing assumptions and bigotries, he also appears to be making an effort to modulate those ideas with counterpoints and not be as just like this guy is already walking circles around Sargon of Akkad, which is bizarre to me. that's kind of where we are. That this nerdy, like, I don't know, is this guy like a Warhammer 40k player or some shit like that? Is like intellectually clearly more interested in accuracy than Sargon. Although I guess Sargon is also like a Warhammer 40k bro. So mostly softened on that around the mid-20th century. On what? Oh, the Masons with the Catholic thing. Okay, that makes sense.
Change was that with the Industrial Revolution, which was really the thing that gave the left its legs, turning it from a
we need each other, but it happens when all of our needs are resolved by AI machines. Do we need still that front? Yeah, I mean, I just don't see a future where all of our needs are resolved by AI machines. I don't even know what that would look like.
A bunch of silly radicals to the world's dominating ideology, partly by making the world's population majority urban in itself. The Industrial Revolution also created strong incentives towards standardization, social engineering, and technological progress, thus playing into earlier occult beliefs about radical simplification. Hegel studied the occult very deeply, and it seeps into his entire work. He was basically trying to write history in a theological way, while pulling from esoteric mysticism.
Also, this is like better than any Tick history video I've seen. You know? Like, if we had gotten to this point in Tick history had made this video, I would already be ripping my hair out due to the insane nonsense he'd be spewing. But, like, I'm surprised by how little of that there is here. I'm kind of glad about it.
Marx took Hegel's work on its head and flipped it from what was originally completely spiritual or mystic in the Hegelian tradition.
Is the front of politeness still necessary in the digital age? Interesting question, not sure. I mean, what's different about the digital age? Fine, it's all words.
Into completely materialistic. One of the fascinating things about leftist philosophy is that it's basically the only intellectual tradition which is purely materialistic, at least on paper, in that the leftist philosophy rejects the soul or spiritual world in toto. This is important since in a purely materialistic worldview, standards of conduct don't really exist, and the ends naturally justify the means, given moral standards aren't real. Leftist philosophy literally does not believe in a concept of truth. This sounds like a conservative conspiracy theory, but I've taken a course in gender studies and have read a bunch of books on leftist philosophy. They literally say they believe it in that the powerful can socially construct reality for whatever they believe. In my opinion, the reason the left has such a power...
I mean, postmodernist philosophy, sure, but, like, there's still a lot of left-wing people who believe in the concept of truth. I mean, we even had Joe Biden saying, I might not be as sharp as I used to be. I might not debate as good as I used to. But at least I speak the truth. So clearly, I mean, there is a belief in a concept called truth among the left. It's not this... And this is the problem, I think, with this video, is that he's, like, really condensing this subject in a way that obscures it rather than illuminates it, unfortunately.
Powerful propaganda arm, focusing on how kind they are, is that when you boil down how they see the world, that's just the underlying principle. When you give people that principle, almost all will reject it. In that, if you ask a normal person, do the people in power determine reality, they're going to say no. And because of that, the left focuses on the external trappings of their worldview, like how kind they are, not the underlying philosophic principles. In fact, you could view our entire society as the desperate attempt to avoid thinking about about how stupid our underlying philosophic principles are as we use hedonism and ideology to never think about it. In leftist philosophy, the most important thing is that you push for the revolution. There's this meme on right-wing Twitter that whenever you talk to the left on any given issue, whether climate change, the economy, racial issue...
I don't know if I agree with that. Like, what he just said there, that, like, all of... That, like, what, left-wing people know their philosophy is stupid and so they don't want to think about it? Well, that doesn't make any sense. Why don't they just believe something different? If they know that they're idiots, why don't they just decide to believe what you believe or something else, you know? So that doesn't make any sense to me. That's like, what the hell are you talking about? That just goes against common sense and human nature, I think. I think that the truth is a lot more... complicated than that. I think that, you know, a broad variety of ideas have proliferated among so-called left-wing people, and people on the left disagree about quite a lot of things, and that's okay.
It's never about the issue. It's really about the revolution. This is something Marx said.
IRL, I had to remove my stitches, and I acted as polite as possible because I was afraid what the other person would do. But if it was bot, I couldn't care. You know, because AI don't have no feeling. Yeah, but, you know, as long as we're interacting with other people, we do care. So, I don't know if it's going to, like... I don't know if it's going to have as big of an effect on how we treat other people as you think. But it might. I don't know. It's hard to predict that kind of thing.
That in his own philosophy, in that in Marxism, philosophy itself is lame since philosophers weren't pushing for the revolution. The rule of life is to push for the revolution, and if a philosopher isn't doing that, he's complicit in the old evil established order. Thus, in leftist philosophy, which lacks an effective metaphysics, the way to be moral is to push for the revolution and its related social agendas. Thus, to be moral in the leftist worldview is to fervently believe whatever is strategically efficient for the left as a movement at that given time. What this results in is the constant virtue signaling and one-upsmanship you see in leftist regimes, whether Mao, Stalin, the French Revolution, or the modern West. Since there are no moral principles, they can't stop themselves anywhere or reset. It's also why they can...
It's not that there are no moral principles. These people do believe in morality. You are conflating two different things. You're conflating people who are kind of nihilistic and skeptical and postmodern about, like, morality with a totally different group of people who act differently, who don't behave as if that's true. They behave as if morality is very real, and if you don't agree with them on their, you know, arbitrary moral principles, then you're the enemy. Which, if anything, is a more right-wing mindset. I mean, that's why political correctness I've always viewed as a right-wing mindset, you know? It's just that it appears in various guises, some of which are progressive. Others are what we could call conservative or reactionary. But it's a mindset of fear and conformity and hyper-moralism. So no, this is, I think, a bad analysis. I think where there is an intersection, let's talk about that, where there is an intersection between these two ideas of morality being a construct and a fiction, and morality being very real, and we all have to get in line with the politically correct agenda. I think that often people on the left who are smart are able to conceptualize and understand philosophically the origins of morality, and that it's not metaphysical. They can see that materialistically, but that doesn't in any way impact how much they actually believe in right and wrong. So there is a complexity there. It's not like people behave in exactly the way their stated philosophy would imply, or it's not like people have like a very intuitive philosophy all the time, because a lot of the time people have realized that the truth is unintuitive, like with quantum physics. And so they can believe something intellectually without actually believing it in a practical and emotional way. So that is a key thing that this guy just doesn't seem to be understanding here. Or he's misrepresenting. But I think it's very important to get that distinction. Nobody would say their philosophy is stupid. Yeah, I mean, I just don't get where the motivation is to run from your own philosophy. You know, if you don't like your own philosophy, I don't know. But I guess a lot of it is social, you know. People ask each other what to believe a lot of the time. So it's complex. There's a lot that goes into it.
Immediately rationalize any breaking of their own moral codes. Leftism ends up in very stupid places again and again due to this mechanism. One of the things I can never wrap my head around that it's real is that the left will have their elite.
This happens to me sometimes. I'll like record something else on a different day and it just sounds different. That's clearly what happened here.
Elites pick a strategic calculation for power, and then the lower ranks of the elite in future generations of the left will unironically believe these strategic calculations as if they are religious dogma. An example of that is that in the mid-20th century, the left made a very clear strategic decision to emphasize women, ethnic minorities, and gay people. And now the left treats those intersectionalities as sacred, and they have zero self-awareness that in a different timeline, they would have the Jews or the Catholics or the working classes as the demographics they would push. And if you read mid-20th century leftist authors like Saul Alinsky or Gramsci, and Yuri Bezmenov, this is just literally what they say they're doing, that they're picking certain groups to get into power, and they made the strategic decision that the working classes were no longer a demographic which they could use to get power. And the crazy thing is that the leftist elite today completely unironically believes in these things that their elites made as strategic calculations, and there's zero self-awareness involved here that this is all a cynical ploy, and they act as if it's the Bible. I will keep repeating this, but things that sound like conservative propaganda are things the left literally publicly says. In the leftist worldview, the ultimate aim is the seizure of power, and anything can be justified in order to reach that point. I keep seeing conservatives get their panties in a twist about the left being hypocrites. There's this whole tagline in conservative media, what if the roles were reversed? Or conservatives were doing what leftists do. I've just stopped caring. Not being hypocrites isn't a part of their value system, and thus they have no reason to not be hypocrites. They don't give a damn about what if the roles were reversed. They care about winning. I think the Unabomber made the best assessment of the modern left I've seen anywhere. In the anonymous urban world of industrial civilization, where we are all cogs in the machine, it doesn't...
I just don't see the difference between the left and the right on this point. I mean, he's saying all this like, yeah, people care more about the ends than the means, you know. But isn't that everyone? Like, how are you special? How are your people somehow immune to that? That seems like, no, there's no shit. Just everyone does this. Because everyone, you know, everyone can see the limitation of limiting yourself. And in fact, I think when it comes to American politics today, you know, the left is far more reserved in, you know, what they're willing to accept as far as means go. They have much less of an ends justify the means mentality than the right does. And that's just observable based on the dynamics in Washington right now that you can read about in the news every fucking day. Everyone cares more about the ends than the means. It's, yeah, I mean, it seems like, you know, people care about both, but, you know, sometimes they behave in one way and sometimes they behave in the other way. It just depends on how pressured they feel and you know, what the circumstances are and what they really want and what they're willing to accept.
Matter if we're richer, the soul aches at the anonymity and sense of meaninglessness, which was totally alien to the complete enveloping, constrictive social conditions of the pre-industrial village. The industrial man works at a job with a boss who doesn't care about him, is surrounded by strangers, and so regulated that he can't change his environment. The Unabomber called this process over-socialization, or the pushing of social pressures to the point where we lose our humanity. The left does this, trying to destroy human nature. The Christian theologian C.S. Lewis said around the time of the World Wars that the greatest crimes of the next century would be caused by men sitting behind desks wearing suits, acting out what they believed was good. He also warned of an abolition of man, or an idea that bureaucratic civilization would try to abolish human nature. This is what the left is doing, trying to remove our normal ethnic, national, or sexual identities, tribes, families, communities, social class, tradition, or anything else that makes us us or gives people meaning in life. This is what the left is trying to do, to break human nature through social engineering, driven off their mistaken belief that human nature is perfect. The Unabomber said that this sense of anonymity came from a sense of resentment at over-socialization. This means that the left is a power fantasy made by people who feel powerless. This makes sense since you can almost perfectly correlate lack of agency in real life with leftism.
But what is the goal of this? If it's all about getting power, what is the end goal here? It's exactly what they state it is. They just want to live in a better world where people are, you know, freer and happier, whatever freedom looks like to them. Happier, living more sustainably. And living with more respect for each other, and that means social equality. So you can make all of these, like, frankly, absurd sort of intellectual pronouncements about these underlying motivations, but then you're still not explaining what the motivation is at the core. Because getting power is not a motivation. What do you want to do with that power? And yeah, when you look at what they want to do with that power, it's all extremely sensible, just noble ideas. And that's really the core of it all. That's the crux of it all. So, you know, he's talking about all this bullshit, like, you know, stripping away the things that give us meaning in life. I think that what we're really seeing is that people want to they just want to improve things, you know? It really depends on the words you use, but we're describing the same thing. You can just say it in a way that makes it sound really insidious. But it's not like there's an insidious motivation at play. It's all pretty much what they say it is. I lost the plot of the vid at some point. It was going somewhere, don't you think? I think you make your own meaning in meaningless world. They want to feel better about themselves and feel comfy in an inherently absurd and meaningless world. I think that's what everyone's trying to do. And people like this guy seem to lack the awareness of the commonality of that motivation.
Bureaucrats, professors, or retail or service workers are all very left-wing. These are jobs without agency where the resentment builds up. Furthermore, the left is all about power. They want a dictatorship of the proletariat and don't make a different plan, even though it's failed dozens of times, given they all secretly want to be dictator. You can see that the left...
But they don't. That's just a lie. That's not what the left is about. That is what the Marxist-Leninists are about, but that's not the left. That's just Marxist-Leninists. Like, this basic shit, you know? Like, there's no excuse for making a mistake like this. It's clearly just lying.
Is all about power and agitation, since they will always pick the most aggressive strategies to get their goals. They will not be strategic and indirect to push the interests of minorities or
no matter that's what any philosophy is. Yeah. See, this is the part of the video where it starts breaking down and getting really stupid. Because I've noticed, like, in the last 5 minutes, there's been way more objectionable content than before.
Or their chosen groups. They do so in the most abrasive way possible that's just going to backfire. Every single thing they say gives them more power. Once I realized every single thing the left says is projection as well, my worldview got a lot darker, but at the same time clearer. I suddenly saw that their projections of hate, institutional power, and racism that they shove onto the right are all completely true about them. What the left says about the right...
Yeah, they're true about the right, too. I mean, like where's the self-awareness here? Like, he complains about the there being like no anthropology of our modern culture, but it seems like and I know that he wants to make this video, and he has by this point, the anthropology of the right. But in that video, is he going to look at it with the same critical eye that he's looking at the left with? It doesn't seem like he's going to do that. It seems like he's just like, he's realized the failure of one ideology and then just decided to be a contrarian. Well, it's not really the smart thing to do.
Is what the left is. If you learn this rule, it's going to save you a bunch of times. One of the most beautiful moments of my life is when...
I feel like most videos like this are going to be biased. It can't be helped, but it can be helped. These are like obvious, easy mistakes that he's making. Like shit that, like, there's no excuse for this. This is just laziness, you know? This is like Vosh, or it's like any of these, you know, really partisan people. Just being very lazy in their analysis, not taking it as seriously as they should.
when I was on Twitter looking at a debate between a leftist woman and a conservative man. I was watching them go at it for a few tweets, and then the leftist woman wrote a criticism of the conservative that was incredibly beautiful because it was such an artistic and intelligent depiction of the flaws in her own argument. I would not be able to write something that poetic if I tried. And
right,
seeing the degree of the left's projection makes me believe in the human soul because there is some deep part of people that know what is inherently wrong. With the rise of the Industrial Revolution came the bureaucracy, which is the underlying driving social class behind the left. I've said before in previous videos that the left exists in the modern West to push the self-interests of the college-educated. Every single thing in the leftist worldview comes from the college-educated self-interest. They push for the abolition of the police and the replacement with college-educated social workers. They want to get rid of the military and replace them with college-educated diplomats. They pervert college-educated professors to traditional religions and their priests. They loathe the working classes at this point, while treating the college-educated barista as their target demographic. They push for college-educated managerial bureaucrats in either the government or private enterprise vis-a-vis the entrepreneurs or merchant class. One of the best political books I've ever read is The Leviathan and Its Enemies by Sam Francis. It explains the current ruling class of our society by talking about how, with the world wars, the managerial class gains total dominance over society. He explains everything going on as the bureaucracy's natural attempt to grow at all costs. One of the interesting facets that goes on here is the bureaucracy will pick issues that just physically can't be solved, thus allowing infinite funding for forever. If we're being blunt, the issues in Black ghetto communities, the hysteria of Karens, and the third world's poverty just won't be fixed by bureaucracies, thus allowing infinite bureaucratic bloat. He argues that the reason the left was able to gain social dominance was that since it naturally appeals to the self-interests of the bureaucracy.
Since when the fuck are the bureaucrats trying to solve the Karen problem? Did I miss something?
Thus, as every single institution becomes run by a bureaucracy, the left was able to gain social control of the upper brass of the military, media, academia, executive branch, educational system, state government, news, religious institutions, and anything else you could imagine. Since power was concentrated in the bureaucracies as the only way to manage an urban society with that technological level, thus those who ran the bureaucracies had the power. This explains pretty cleanly how Western civilization was taken over completely by suicidal maniacs who hate the civilization itself, because the bureaucracy gets power from dismantling Western civilization. Francis often brings up the Italian thinker Gaetano Mosca, who said that the left selects for the certain class of leadership called foxes. Foxes are clever, wily, and manipulative. They are a kind of people who are good at running complex systems. However, they're bad at using physical force or doing hard things that deal with the real world. It fits into a classic historic pattern in which the empire is built by tough, strong men, but after a few generations, the emperor is an old fool or child, while the court is run by harem girls, eunuchs, and bureaucrats.
Seems to me like the left hasn't had any problem with violence or choosing strong leaders, you know. I mean, sometimes they fuck up royally, but you know, there's a lot of left-wing leaders who are, you know, very forceful. I don't know what the fuck he's talking about. It seems like this is just devolving into pure conjecture. Moldbug. He's the NRX replace society with corporate kings guy. Ah, yes, this old cliche.
Since those are the kinds of people who are the best at navigating court politics, or the foxes. Then the empire deteriorates, the peasants rebel, or barbarians burn the capital down. I think this is what will happen to our society, as I've said in a dozen other videos, as we are a society run by eunuchs, harem girls, and bureaucrats driving the nation into insanity. The left in its victory has grown weak and stupid. The left won so hard it lost the ability to do anything. They can't wage war, make companies, art, manage government, do law enforcement, develop new ideas. There's not a single recent left-wing author who I admire. 10 years ago, there were plenty, but the left has become decadent and stupid. One of Francis's ideas that I like the best is that you can divide the modern left into the new left and the consensus liberals. The consensus liberals are the Sam Harris, Redditor, rationalist, the science trademarked UN, graph go up, neoliberal types. I can convey their essence in a jumble of words, better than articulated, but I know that you know what I mean. They are the de facto ruling class. Meanwhile, they are in coalition with the new left.
Started out like based on stuff that we can all pretty much understand what he's getting at. It's backed up by the history, and now it's just all over the place. Like, he's talking about modern society and just going from one topic to the next very haphazardly, really failing to paint a coherent picture of a problem, because everything is like he's way too impatient and unable to organize his thoughts in a way that makes sense. And so this video is just breaking down. It's a disaster.
The new left is Wicca, Mother Goddess, Degrowth, Reparations, Your Truth crew. These two look as if they're in opposition, one being rational and the other being intuitive. The reality is that they've been working together as a sort of tag team, playing good cop, bad cop since the world wars. The consensus liberals pretend to be reasonable, scientific, and a consensus, while the reality is that they artificially stuff the bureaucracies and committees to get whatever they want. Said impersonal processes were supposedly created to bypass the negatives of human nature, while the reality is that they just enable its worst aspects. The consensus liberals use the threat of the new left to keep shuffling the social consensus leftwards. You want to avoid the complete insanity of the new left, so take this reasonable step for progress. This is salami slicing for the left to get total power. The new left is astroturfed as outsiders used to push the regime's interests, given everything the new left pushes for really demands the growth of the managerial class. It's funny how punk rock, rap, and other degenerate, chaotic art forms have just become the mainstream so easily. In almost all cases, what the new left sees as progress is the breakdown of traditional social ties or individual responsibility, which is always filled by the state or management. As the society decays and collapses, the bureaucracy fills the void. Part 3, the abdication of responsibility. This leads into a topic which totally deserves to be its own video, given it taps into the most deep and fundamental part of human or animal nature, a split which goes back nearly 1 billion years, that between men and women. This is literally the most taboo thing to talk about in society, which just proves the point in of itself. You know who's in power by who you're not allowed to criticize. And I frankly think a big reason rightist discourse is so obsessed with the Jews is that they're scared of blaming women. We've reached a point recently in the divide between male and female has become a inherently political divide amongst young people, in that 3-to-1 young men are conservative and the reverse is true for young women. The question I have here is, how the hell are they supposed to start families together and have kids if they're fundamentally different religions or civilizations? If we told any pre-industrial society that the great political divide inside our society was men versus women, they would be
yeah, this vid sounds like Smells Like Children album. This video turned into a rant on how much he hates the left. Good start, but not good ending. Okay.
Be in complete shock. The idea that women could push their own interests would appear insane by historic standards. For a real historic example, the Greek writer Aristophanes in the 4th century BC wrote the play Assemblywomen. It was about a society where only women voted, kicking men out of the franchise. The result of an all-female electorate was that women voted in economic communism, the end of privacy in the nuclear family. Beyond that, the women voted in sexual communism, in which there was free love, but in order to sleep with a beautiful woman, you had to sleep with an ugly one first. The female senators would complain about how difficult being a senator was on the Senate floor, how cold the room was, and they had trouble forming a coherent strategy to carry out their plans. Doesn't this sound awfully familiar? It feels like the Greeks knew something profound about human nature that we've forgotten. If you give women authority due to their own biological self-interests, they will end up pushing certain policies that end up looking a lot like the modern left. Winston Churchill, when asked if he supported women's suffrage, said that if you gave women suffrage, it would become the starting point for a series of social issues that were ridiculous, that would...
Well, he ended up supporting women's suffrage, I think, when he was in the Liberal Party, if I'm not mistaken. I thought I remembered hearing that. He was actually kind of liberal back then, you know? he wasn't quite as old guard as he became, even though he was still very racist in his youth. Very imperialist.
Immediately be championed forever without stop. John Adams, when asked about women's suffrage, said the exact same thing, that society would devolve into pushing silly political projects for greater equality. Firstly, this happens in the industrial world, but not in previous societies to anywhere the same degree, due to the industrial world removing men's advantages in physical strength, and the last feminist wave came about due to women being liberated from sex being immediately associated with childbirth. The real question to ask here is what in female nature meant that an ancient Greek author could predict leftism 2,500 years in advance. An interesting thread that I need to make a video about at some point is that the ancient Greeks did have their own versions of socialism and feminism. Athens at the time of Plato or Pericles treated women like the Taliban does today. Within a century, women got legal equality with men, while Greece saw waves of communist and socialist movements. The reason America's founding fathers were so careful about mob rule and the faults of democracy is that they studied the precedent of Greek socialism very closely. The most important difference between men and women is that men get benefit from risk and women don't.
Well, you know, Sparta, which is often sort of lauded, it was lauded by the Greeks. The Greeks tended to really like Sparta. Even the ones who weren't Spartan really admired them. And it's kind of lauded as a sort of model of a really austere society, a very masculine society. But they had much more liberated women than Athens. Actually, there's a video about this on YouTube. I haven't seen it, but I've seen the thumbnail for it that says, like, why do more warlike societies have more female empowerment or something like that? I haven't seen the video, so I don't know what the conclusion of that was. But I would expect him to bring that up in this video if he's gonna give like a really fair analysis of the situation. Something tells me he's not going to. I hope he does. Because if he doesn't, then it's gonna be like really telling how biased this is. Because you have to account for that if you're going to make these... If you're going to use Greece as an example of what you're talking about. I mean, this is the elephant in the room here.
Men wage war, hunt, go on trading expeditions, while women are weighed down firstly by childbearing and are also just
Greek socialism? I mean, there were socialist ideas in Greece, yeah. It wasn't like it is today, but... There was like anything we have today, you can find some version of it in ancient Greece. You know, it was a very kind of important blooming of intellectualism.
Physically weaker. In game theory terms, this creates very different incentives. For men, it's the formation of systems in which men can excel through doing stuff to make themselves more attractive as mates. For women, it's to mitigate risk as much as humanly possible. This is why female voters push for welfare, the breakdown of the family, war, capitalism, and other things.
Maybe.
In each of these cases, they're removing things that can be bad. You could have a bad husband, the military could turn against you, or your company could fail. The thing thing with government welfare is that no matter how you screw up, the government will still support you and your offspring. This is why there is a relatively close correlation between welfare and feminism over history. The purpose of the left is complete risk mitigation for the individual in this manner. The state does everything for you, so no matter what, you'll be fine. This explains almost all of the left, the attempt to escape responsibility. An important point that modern civilization never...
Well, you can view that as the escape of responsibility, or you can just as easily view it the way my mother views it, which is that the people who are trying to escape responsibility are the people who don't want to actually have to contribute anything to maintaining the order of the system, don't want to have to actually be generous or magnanimous with their property, or the social role that they play in society as business owners. And this idea that, you don't have to get along with other countries, you can just bully and intimidate other countries and take what you want because you don't have any responsibility to the broader community. You don't have to do what anyone tells you to do. You don't have to change your cultural traditions, as barbaric and brutal as they are. You can be proud of because you're perfect exactly the way you are, and you don't have to analyze yourself or do anything differently. I mean, what the fuck, man? This is like obvious. Like, you can twist it any way you want. You can do it the way you're doing it. You can do it the way my mother does it. And at the end of the day, like, it's all bullshit. This whole thing, it's all bullshit. People want what they want, and they will use any language they can to manipulate people into believing what they believe. So, like, freedom is whatever the fuck you want it to be. Responsibility is whatever the fuck you want it to be. These words are meaningless. Why can't we just admit that we have different values and opinions and we want different things? It doesn't have to be... It's not like responsibility just means one thing. There are different interpretations of the concept. This is a very basic, very biased analysis of political philosophy. Really, like, fucking just, like, drunk the Kool-Aid cult view of things.
Makes is that the human experience is largely lived through individual consciousness, in that things like nations and groups form, but it's formed by the individual consciousness. And so things that are really questions just about human life itself have important ramifications for society itself. And the left is resentful that we are born into a world of suffering where you have to actually do things to survive. And thus, in a very childlike form, they just rebel against that and the idea that you have to struggle in life. There's another fascinating divide that the right versus left divide is very much R versus K selection. R selection is you make short-term decisions to have as many children as possible evolutionarily and just hope they survive while giving them very low investment, and K selection is high investment.
Has no bearing on. What part am I going to have to repeat? I don't know when it cut out. Basically, like, everything this guy's saying is bullshit. He may be trolling us. Who's trolling us? Yeah, I know. I don't know why the fucking button was pressed. I didn't press it. But I unpressed it. Right when you paused. I didn't pause. Nothing happened. It just did that of its own accord. So I don't know when, like, I didn't cut out my own mic. So I don't know when the fuck what I said wasn't picked up. Okay? It's not like I did that on purpose. But yeah, like, what I was trying to say was that this guy's like, he has this belief that responsibility is a virtue, but that's a totally made up belief. There's no virtue in responsibility. Responsibility is only virtuous as a means to an end, right? Because there's no such thing as inherent virtues. Everything is a means to an end. That doesn't mean that the ends always justify the means, as this guy would inaccurately strawman everyone who believes that. But it means that everything is a means to an end. So, there's no inherent virtue in living. Therefore, there's no inherent virtue in responsibility. I love Forever Dirt. I would never question my sexuality, but oh god, I love Forever Dirt. Anyway.
Long term, and our selection does better in more chaotic societies where if you're in this bloodthirsty tribal culture, you'll just try to sleep with as many women as possible and hope they survive, while in a more industrialized, more educated culture, you need to put more investment in your children. And the left pushes things like abortion, it pushes low emphasis on getting
okay, so you missed the entire thing then.
values. It pushes low emphasis on marriage, cultural traditions, all these things that further case selection, while the right is the opposite.
All right, that whole thing, getting paused, like getting my microphone cut off like that, just made me just sour on this whole project. So